I wasn't expecting my first public speaking to be at a women's conference after all I've been through. When Noreen asked me, I said, Nor, in case you haven't noticed, and she was like, well, let me tell you what the theme of the conference is. And when she told me it was about, what do you want to be when you grow up, I understood why she asked me. Because ever since I was little, I knew exactly what I wanted to be. A personnel manager. It's true. Came from watching too many Mary Tyler Moore episodes, and my parents always had it on. And so I watched it with him, and I noticed Lou Grant, he was the boss, and his answer to everything was send him down to personnel. So I was like, I want to work in personnel. That's where all the action is. I'm going there. Then I found out that I'd have to fire people, and I decided that probably wasn't for me. So instead I got into advertising, and I started my career. I was 24. I started as a junior copywriter at Arnold. My father, Ed Eskandarian, he was the CEO and owner of Arnold at the time. And let me tell you, it's not easy being the boss's daughter, especially when you've always known deep down that you were his son. I first verbalized that when I was 4. And I actually came out to my grandmother. I just didn't know that's what I was doing. Neither did she. My family was at her summer cottage on the Cape. And my older sister, Wendy, and I were sitting on the faded oriental rug in the family room with our coloring books and crayons while my grandmother was, carting platters of food from the kitchen to the dining room, passing us every time. And on her last pass, she said, "Come on, girls, dinner's ready." And Wendy immediately sprung up and followed her into the dining room. And I just didn't flinch. I honestly did not think she was talking to me. And then a minute or two later, she came back. She came back over to me, and she looked me in the eye, and she said, "Didn't you hear me calling you?" And I said, "No." And I said, "Come on, girls." And I said, "I'm not a girl." And she said, "Yes, you are." And I said, "No, I'm not. I'm a boy." And she said, "No, you're not, sweetheart." And I said, "Well, I'm gonna be." And she said, "You can't, darling." And she, sympathetically looked at me and walked back into the kitchen. And I'm sitting there, and I'm like, "Whatever, Graham, whatever. I'm going to make this happen with or without you." And according to my 4-year-old brain, the only difference between boys and girls was that boys had short hair and girls had long hair. So I told my mom, I want my hair cut like Daddy's. Problem solved. Or so I thought. It wasn't until the following summer when I realized I was lacking certain equipment. And again, I was at my grandmother's summer cottage. My sister Wendy and my younger cousin Adam and I had just come back from the beach. And we were having popsicles out on the back deck. And my cousin Adam says to me, "Watch this." And he turns to the side and pees in a perfect arc right over the deck rail. And I'm like, when I pee, it goes straight down. And I'm like, "Oh my God, how did you do that? Do you have a squirt gun in there?" And of course, Wendy, older and wiser, is like, "Duh, he has a penis." And I'm thinking, what is this penis? And how come I don't have one? And, I already felt stupid, so I wasn't about to ask. But I just figured I'd probably grow one, and it hadn't grown yet. Well, that didn't happen, and I began to realize something was terribly wrong. And every night, I would go to bed, and I would pray that somehow, some way, my body would turn into a boy's body. And everybody would realize they were all wrong, thinking that I was a girl. Well, my body changed all right, just not the way I'd hoped it would change. And puberty struck, and my body betrayed me in the worst possible way I could imagine. And I knew then that I was stuck. I was stuck with this body I hated, and I was stuck being a girl. And there was nothing I could do about it. I became very depressed, and my whole personality changed. I was not the fun-loving kid I used to be. I became angry. I was snapping at everybody. And my father was actually the first person to notice it, or at least call it to my attention. And he called me aside, and he's like, "Chris, you used to be so easygoing. You were the calm one in the family." I had to calm him down all the time. And he said, what's wrong? What's happening? And I couldn't explain it. And even if I could, I was scared to say anything. So what would be the point anyway? Even if I could, there was nothing I could do about it. So I just, I answered him in the same way any 12-year-old would answer their parents' question. I don't know. I don't know. And then through junior high and high school, I knew I was attracted to girls. So I'd heard the word gay, and I knew what it meant, or at least I thought I knew what it meant, and I figured, oh God, I must be gay. And that's a common mistake a lot of people make at first. It's very hard for people to grasp that sexual preference and gender identity are two completely separate and different things. One way to understand it is sexual preference is who you go to bed with, and gender identity is who you go to bed as. But I didn't know any of that back at the time. All I knew was, oh my God, I think I'm gay. And that was traumatizing enough for me, just even that. You have to remember, this was the early 80s. Nobody was openly gay. Certainly nobody in white upper-class suburbia, which is where I lived. There weren't even any celebrities to point to. George Michael was still in the closet, and those were the Wham years. So, for anyone who knows, he's up on stage in white capri pants singing, "Wake Me Up Before You Go-Go." But he's not gay. The problem was, I looked up the definition of gay just to make sure, because that's how I am. I'm very thorough. So I looked it up, and all it said was someone who's attracted to the same sex. It didn't say anything about feeling like you were in the wrong body or wanting to become the opposite sex. So I just figured I was a freak, and there was no way in hell I was ever going to tell anybody what I was really feeling. Certainly not my family. I just couldn't humiliate them, and I couldn't bear the thought of them being ashamed. So I made a decision spring of my senior year in high school, and I decided that I'm going to go to college. It's supposed to be fun. I'm going to party it up for 4 years, and then I'm going to kill myself after graduation. Now, the first part of the plan was easy. I'd already gotten into Colgate, and I'd heard that they were ranked the #1 party school in the US that year. But graduation came and went, and I couldn't bring myself to follow through with the rest of the plan. So where did that leave me? Well, when you get to a point in your life where you don't want to live it anymore, you have two choices. You can either end it or you can change it. And I couldn't bring myself to end it, so I knew I had to change it. Now, lucky for me, I had... Thank you. Lucky for me, I had 3 things going for me. And the first one was a loving and supportive family. And this is something that most trans kids do not have. And it's a big reason why the suicide attempt rate is 50%, 50. Now, I'm not saying that when I finally told my parents, they were like, well, let's go get you some surgery. You know, they were supportive, but they were cautiously supportive. And, you know, there was very, very little information, certainly no success stories to point to. And surgery at that time was nowhere near what it is today. My parents were scared. They were scared for me. They were scared that I was going to go through all of this and end up being worse off than I already was. And I remember my dad said to me, he had been processing the news for a week or two, and he said to me, do you think you could just stay the way you are and just consider this your handicap? And I said to him, this is my identity. This is not something I can compartmentalize, that I can put on the shelf. It's who I am every day. And if I have to keep living as a girl, I would rather not live at all. And he hugged me, and he said, we will figure this out together as a family, and we'll get through it. And it was that feeling of not being alone anymore that gave me the courage and the hope to go on and take the next step. Which brings me to the second thing I had going for me. How many people here have been in therapy? Wow. All right. I didn't think anyone would raise their hand, to be honest. That cancels out the joke I had planned. Finding the right therapist was critical for me in getting through this transition as successfully as I did. In fact, I credit my therapist with saving my life. I really do. And it doesn't mean I didn't want to kill her many times during the process, especially in the beginning. I remember walking into her office and meeting her for the first time in Central Square, and she was exactly what I pictured a Cambridge therapist would look like. Medium straight brown hair, graying, parted in the middle, big glasses, no makeup, turtleneck sweater, corduroys, sensible all-weather walking shoes. Subaru Outback parked in front. And I walk into her office, and she ushers me in, and I sit down on the 70s era couch across from her. And I'm nervous, but I'm hopeful, and I'm finally someone who's a professional who knows I'm going to get these words of wisdom from her. And instead, I enter into a staring contest, and she just stares at me. And I'm like, you know, is this some, you know, I was a psych major, and I'm like, is this some psychoanalytical trick she's pulling on me? You know, why won't she ask me a question? And, well, as it turns out, my wish would be granted, because asking me questions was her way of answering all my questions. So, you know, I finally, so where should we start? Where do you want to start? Wherever you, I don't know, wherever you think is best. Where do you think is best? I just wanted answers. You know, I wanted someone to tell me what to do, what's my next steps, what am I doing? Initially, I planned to move away where nobody knew me and transition just somewhere else. And she got me to realize that I was going to need a lot of support, and to move away somewhere without any family or friends and try to transition in secret, while that might sound appealing now, it would actually be harder and more stressful in the long run. So it was her that opened my eyes and got me to stay in Boston and transition at Arnold. Which leads me to the third thing that I had going for me. I worked in advertising. So I was able to take the branding and marketing principles I'd learned and I'd been applying to my client's business and use them to rebrand myself. But before I go there, I just got to tell you a little bit about me. Anyone who knows me, and there's a lot of you here, anyone who knows me knows that I am not type A. I am type A+. Maybe even A++. I know it's rare for a creative director, but it's true, and this is why account people and clients all love working with me. I am a strategizer. I'm a planner. I plan everything. Planning gives me control, or at least the illusion of control. So when it came to my transition, you can bet your ass I planned the shit out of that thing. That was like a year in the making. But I'm also a worrier. I worry about everything. Everything. To give you an idea, in high school, I was voted most likely to get an ulcer. Seriously, I was. Yep. I saw the yearbook and I was like, what? So when it comes to changing my gender in front of everybody I knew, I was consumed with worry. Worry about what are people going to think? What are people going to say? What are people going to do? And it was my therapist who got me to realize that the way I acted could actually control or shape, to some extent, the way others reacted. I had that ability, and I had that control. And when she said that, it clicked, and it was like unlocking this secret inner power that I didn't know I had. And it's actually what gave me the balls to go through and say, all right, you know what? I'm going to do this, and I'm going to take control of this, and I'm going to make this happen. The first thing you do with any rebranding campaign is evaluate the landscape, right? That's what you do. So it was 1995, and transgender wasn't even a word yet. The word was transsexual, and it had a very negative connotation. It still does, actually. And back at that time, the only points of reference people had to that word were movies like Silence of the Lambs, where the villain, Buffalo Bill, he was a frustrated transsexual, and no one would give him a gender reassignment, so he would skin these women, and he was going to sew together a female bodysuit for himself. Nice. Ace Ventura: Pet Detective, in the end, the villain ended up being an unstable transsexual. And then, of course, the stellar guests on Jerry Springer, as seen in this episode entitled Tranny-licious. So this is what's out there. I didn't just have to rebrand myself, I had to rebrand an entire category. So what was my brand message going to be? It was simple. I needed to convey to people that I was not a whack job like the media might portray. I wanted people to know that I was normal. I'm trying to normalize this and bring it down to a regular, relatable level. So, what was my brand personality going to be? I decided I was going to take an educational approach to this thing. And I was going to be open, be honest, encourage questions, volunteer information. You know, I'm an oversharer to begin with, so this was just an extension of my personality. I felt this was the best way to, educate people along the way and have them realize that I am still the same person, that I am normal. Part of the way I did this was using my sense of humor. And it was very important to me to make light of the situation and help people feel at ease. And the first time I made a joke about it was like an involuntary reaction. I don't know is Ellen Wallet in the room? I don't know where she is. There she is. Ellen was the head of AV at Arnold at the time. She was explaining to her intern what a female-to-male adapter was. And I happened to be at her open doorway just as she holds it up and says, "This is a female-to-male." So I stuck my head and I said, "Hey, stop talking about me." So then the next thing I needed was a good communication plan. How was I going to get the word out? Well, I knew the best way would be for it to come from me personally. And because of my father's position in the company, I decided that I've got to tell the executive board. That was a treat. But I knew I had to do it, and out of respect, I wanted to do it first. I didn't want the gossip to trickle upward. I wanted to tell them first. And then I thought, well, okay, I do that, and then what about the other 500 people at the agency? How are they going to find out? I did not want the executive board sending out a memo. And I was not going to call an agency meeting, and it's already nerve-wracking, this is what it would be like. So what was I going to do? Now, this is where my background in advertising really came in handy. I had just recently learned about evangelism marketing. Evangelism marketing is basically encouraging others to take a leadership role in actively spreading the word on your behalf. You might call it word of mouth now. It's cooler. And not religious. So, but back then it was evangelism marketing. And at Arnold, it was talked about quite a bit, and the goal at Arnold was to make consumers brand evangelists for our clients. And it hit me, why not make my coworkers brand evangelists for me? And that's what I did. One by one, I came out to my 12 closest agency friends, and I told them my story in great detail, and I coached them on how to tell my story to other people. And I even had them practice on me, which was a good idea. More so for some than others. But I then told them the date and time of the executive board meeting, and that when that meeting was over, they should go and start spreading the word. So the executive board meeting was on a Monday from 4 to 5 p.m. And by 11 a.m. the next morning, the entire agency knew. My strategy worked. So how'd it go over? Well, I can tell you that I really didn't want to go into work that morning after the meeting, but I knew I had to, or people would think I was ashamed, and I was not ashamed. But still, it was nerve-wracking. So I made a point to get into work really early. Well, 8:45. Early for a creative. It's early for a creative. I got in and I didn't see anyone, and I just went into my office and sat in there, waiting. And actually, the first person that came by was my art director partner, Martin. And he had already known my boss, Kathy Kiley, had hired him to partner with me, and we talked and strategized, and we decided he should know before accepting the job. And his response was, as long as he's a good writer, I don't care, which was great. And Martin knew the meeting, and he came in my door and he said, "Hi, Chris," or should I say, Chris? Because, you know, my name was the same, right? And then he disappeared as soon as the parade of people started coming by. The first person came by and just grabbed me and gave me a hug and told me how brave he thought I was. Then the head of print production showed up, and she just said, "Hey, when you know, let me know how you want me to do your new business cards." Account people for the pieces of business I worked on came up to offer their support and, you know, wanted to know how would you like us to start informing clients. It was just amazing. Hugs and well wishes all day. One of my buddies gave me a bar mitzvah card, and I still have it. It said, "Congratulations, today you are a man." And on the inside, because he worked in the studio and he's crafty, he customized the inside panel to have all sorts of guy tips for me, like always look straight ahead at the urinal when you're at the urinal. Never, don't try to get another, that's what we do, that's the code. But I don't want to imply that every person I saw that day acknowledged it with me or commented on it. That wasn't the case. A lot of people just treated me like they normally would, which was fine by me, let me tell you, you know. And there were some negative reactions. I'd be naive to think that there wouldn't be. But none of them were to my face, which was good. I'd heard about a few of them. One of them I'll tell you about was one of my evangelists had told a group of her girlfriends in the creative department, and she had commented on how brave she thought that I was for doing it. And one of the girls just said, "Well, it's a lot easier when your father's the CEO." "Really, bitch? You try it." Are you kidding? I have to tell you that day, it could not have gone any better for me. All right? So now, this was day one. I hadn't even transitioned yet. So I gone through all this, and I hadn't even begun to even start getting into my male me. So there's a big misconception. I think people think that when somebody transitions, they decide they're going to do it, and then boom, they show up to work in a wig and a dress, and there it is. But the fact is that everybody transitions in their own way. They do it however they feel is right for them, and they do it differently. Kristen Beck, she was in the SEALs for almost 20 years, and she decided when she retired from the SEALs that she was going to be her true self, and she came out on LinkedIn. And then the next day, she showed up to her job at the Pentagon as her female self. Bruce Jenner, I'm sure you've all heard about this, he looks like he's transitioning, but he hasn't actually come out yet. He hasn't said anything. He hasn't made it official. So for different reasons, both of these examples, the gossip and speculation were off the charts. And for me, I handled my transition completely different. My goal was to minimize the gossip. So the way I handled the physical part of my transition was very gradual. I'd always had short hair. It was a gender neutral kind of way. I could have just gone to the barber shop and butchered my hair, got all cut off. But I knew if I did that and made a drastic change like that, that's just something for people to talk about. So I cut my hair in stages. I began testosterone injections, and between that and my Armenian heritage, you can imagine the hair growth. So I could have grown a beard relatively easily, but I didn't. Would I have liked to? Yes. It would have covered up my newfound acne problem. It's nothing like going through male puberty at age 26. But I didn't, because again, that's just, oh, did you see Chris is growing a beard? Oh, Chris has a beard. So I didn't. And lucky for me, the anything goes dress code in the creative department, I was already wearing jeans and button-downs to work anyway. So aside from a client meeting at the Hartford with Kathy where I need to wear a coat and tie or something, my wardrobe was essentially almost the same. So combined, all said, my plan worked. Within 2 years, year 2 of my transition, people were saying to me, I have no idea what you used to look like. I don't even remember. It's kind of like when somebody's losing weight and they might lose 2 pounds a month and you see them every day and you don't notice it. But if you haven't seen them and a year later you see them, you're like, oh my God. So these people were with me every day and didn't even notice. Then there was the bathroom issue. The one thing that the executive board freaked out about was my using the men's room. I had gone into this 15-minute talk, very heartfelt and emotional, and at the end of it, it was all about the men's room. Oh my God. I don't know what all the fuss is about. But there was fuss, and they actually suggested sending out a memo telling the whole agency that I'd be using the men's room. So I told them that I anticipated this might be an issue, and I'd already decided that I was not going to use the men's room or the ladies' room at Arnold for 2 weeks, just to give everybody time to sit with it and get used to the idea. So instead, you're probably like, what'd you do? I'll tell you what I did. I went down 13 floors to the lobby, went around the back 3 blocks to Rebecca's Cafe, where they had a gender-neutral bathroom. Inconvenient? Yes. Especially with my small bladder. I've actually had to pee for 10 minutes now. But that's what I did, and I knew it would be better for the long run. It was the right thing to do. And then when I actually did start using the precious men's room, there was some talk. Ooh, I saw Chris in the men's room, whatever. But what are you talking about? I'm using the stall. What? And unlike most of the guys in there who bring in reading material and spend the day in there, I'm like trying to get in and get out. It wasn't until 10 years or so later, it took a long time, where I was actually able to use the urinals. And so I went in and started using the urinals, and then the talk started up again. But by then, people had gotten used to the idea, and there was a little bit of talk. But again, we're all looking straight ahead. So what? You can't see anything. What do you? So there was nothing really to talk about. Which brings me to, finally, there was the surgical aspect of my transition. The rule of thumb, just for all of you here. The rule of thumb is, should you meet a transgender person, you should never, ever ask them if they've had surgery or plan to have surgery. It's none of your business, but also it's offensive to them because by asking them that question, you are implying that they are not the gender they feel they are if they don't have that surgery. And a lot of transgender people choose not to have surgery for various reasons, whether it be they can't afford it, or they don't want to, or it's traumatic, or whatever the reason. So what you should do is just take your cues from them. And if they're talking about it and open about it, and then feel free. But in my case, for me, I knew I wanted surgery right from the get-go. It was the only thing that was going to make me feel complete as a man. So I was going to do it, and I was going to do whatever it took. And so there was a time there at Arnold, while I was managing one of the largest pieces of business. There was a 5-year period when I had 22 surgeries. That's like one every 3 months. The deluxe model doesn't come easy. I'm just telling you that right now. So for me, I was already open about my transition to begin with. I didn't care if people knew I was having surgery. I mean, what was I going to make up a lie 22 times of where I was? I mean, it didn't make any sense. And so I also, as a manager, I wanted people to know where I was and how to reach me and what was going on. So I was very open about it. It was actually less stressful for me. So measuring success. Well, I accomplished my short-term goals very well, and there was only one long-term goal that I had when I started this journey, and that was not to let my transition define me. I just wanted to get through it. Transition, the word means you go from one place to the other. And I wanted to be done and be the man that I always knew that I was. And I achieved that. It took time, and all rebranding campaigns do. They all take time, as we know. But I was successful. I am not my parents' transgender son. I'm their son. My friends don't introduce me as, this is my trans friend Chris. I'm just Chris, or Eddie, or P-head, or Bird. And at Arnold, I wasn't Chris Edwards, the transgender creative director. I was just a creative director. Well, I was an EVP group creative director. I don't want to shortchange myself here. But the fact is, I don't consider myself transgender anymore. I was at a time. That part of my life has been over for a long time. That said, recently I made the decision to get back into the transgender spotlight and start being more vocal about this. I've written my memoir. It's called Balls. I can't tell you when it's going to come out yet because I'm still trying to get a publishing deal, and I'm hoping, fingers crossed, that the right editor will come along. And if not, I will probably self-publish it. It worked well for Lisa. So we'll see. And while my gender change is the backdrop for the story, obviously, the main message is about having the courage to be true to yourself and not let fear of what other people will think or say or do get in the way of you being happy. And my hope is that people will read my story and come away empowered and inspired and more accepting and understanding of somebody going through a transition. And that was my hope also of speaking to all of you today. True to my brand, I will be at the cocktail reception the entire time. And I am happy to answer any questions, whether it be about my personal journey or the topic in general. Just buy me a drink and I'll tell you anything you want to know. Thank you very much.